Hi, Regan.
Hey, Rihanna.
I hear you have a new pet.
I do. Yeah, it's a little bit of a problematic pet. He's been giving me kind of a tough time lately. I keep him in the fridge because I think he needs a little less care when he's in there. But even with that, people might start to feel like I'm not really doing enough to care for this pet. And I feel a little guilty about it.
We are talking about a sourdough starter, which is a living being.
It's alive.
Allegedly.
And yes, just before anyone gets too concerned, my pet is a sourdough starter that I keep in my refrigerator and that I think you're supposed to feed at least once every 5 days, but I'm going to say I've been stretching that schedule out a little bit longer than the 5 days, probably.
You've been starving it?
Look, the legislative session has me pretty busy, and my sourdough starter pet is kind of like back of mind sometimes.
Okay. So the problematic part of the sourdough pet is that it needs too much love and attention at the moment.
Right. And to be fair, like I did try giving it love and attention. I actually sang to it recently because I don't know if you've seen those studies about like seedlings, like the seedlings that you like sing to or like play classical music to. And okay, let me be clear too. When I say studies, I think I mean like 6th grade science fair projects. I don't know if you've seen those 6th grade science fair projects where like you sing to the bean seeds and like those ones grow faster and then you like ignore the other bean seeds and those ones get like moldy and sad. So I did for a while really give this sourdough starter my all. I made it from scratch. I sang to it, I fed it a lot, and they say that like to know that your starter is like ready to make bread, it's supposed to like double in size, like grow by 50%. I can't get mine to grow by more than 25%. And so I am losing hope a little bit.
Wow.
I still haven't made any bread.
You haven't made any bread from it?
No.
But
no
once you get it sort of going, if you get it going, it should make bread for you for a while, I think.
Yeah, people have sourdough starter that's like hundreds of years old is what I've heard. So I think that it can, make bread forever.
Yeah, if you can get it to double in size.
If you just sing it the right song, I think maybe you can get the sourdough going.
Have you named your sourdough pet?
I haven't, but I'm open to suggestions. I think that people do name their sourdough starters, and I think that I would name mine if I really started to feel successful with it. But it's hard to commit with a name right now when it's not really in a thriving type of situation. So I think maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe if I named it, it would start to grow.
Yeah, it's like a commitment issue.
Yeah.
To the sourdough pet.
Maybe we've discovered something about me today.
Maybe we have.
Like before you adopt a pet, you do a lot of research, right?
Yeah.
How much care will this pet need? Like how much grooming does it need? What are its personality traits? I didn't do my sourdough research.
It doesn't fit into your life.
Yeah, I might not have the right lifestyle for raising a sourdough bread. And I think also, I thought, people have been making sourdough since forever, like long before the internet existed. I thought it must be pretty straightforward. But it turns out if you want to figure out how to make sourdough, you have to watch hours and hours of YouTube videos because it's not as simple as like, oh, just mix some flour and some water together. You've got your scale out and you've got like percents, like, oh, well, if it's going to be 30% water, you have to have this other percent flour. And so the research aspect, I think, of sourdough is really slowing me down as well. I think I really need maybe just like an expert who could show me how to do it.
This week, we raise sourdough, or at least keep it alive, with the help of an expert.
I feel like sourdough is a bit more forgiving than a traditional bread, actually.
Shannon Smith is the co-owner of Ground Ops Bakery and Roastery. She teaches people how to raise and bake sourdough.
I think sourdough is actually more user-friendly and simpler than a regular yeast-based dough. You do not have to knead it and kind of wrestle with it the way you do a regular dough.
Sourdough is distinct from regular dough.
Sourdough starts with a sourdough starter, which is essentially a fermented combination of flour and water. And it pulls in actually like gluten from the air. You use that starter to then make the bread. So it tastes a little tangier than regular bread, but in terms of the health benefits, because it starts with that fermented starter, it actually is really good for gut health. It's very much like the fermented quality of like kimchi, you know, anything pickled is the same idea. Even yogurt has fermentation in it in the probiotics. So that's basically what makes a sourdough. Your starter is actually like a living, breathing thing. When you feed it, it will expand in size and then go back down. We have named our starter Audrey, like Little Shop of Horrors, because you have to feed it every day. And so if your starter is not bubbly enough, it's not gonna have, you know, what it needs basically. The bubbles in the starter are akin to what you would have with a yeast bread, right? That's basically what makes it rise. Or they don't use bread flour, so you need a flour that has more protein in it than a regular all-purpose flour. Some people are actually overworking the dough. So I've heard of people trying to do it in like a KitchenAid. You cannot do that. It will turn it into the most dense, horrible loaf you can imagine. It's just too tight. You actually need a very kind of light work happening in the kneading to make it airier and more delicious.
If you're a mindful sourdough parent and you do manage to get your sourdough to grow, then comes the baking process.
Our recipe, we do 500 grams of flour, 375 grams of water, 100 grams of starter, and 10 grams of salt. You mix all of those together, and it's going to be really clumpy at first, and then every 30 minutes for 2 hours total, you turn it 4 times. And you basically are just kind of folding that bread lightly. Then you let it proof, basically double in size for about 8 hours. And then you are basically ready to form it into a nice little round loaf and you can bake it.
Once your sourdough starter is started, it'll thrive as long as you can tend to it.
Oh, ours is 3.5 years old. I mean, you know, when you're not wanting to feed it, you can leave it in the fridge and it kind of puts it into a dormant state. But then as soon as you take it out, leave it at room temperature and start feeding it again, it will become alive again, which is pretty cool. But I mean, listen, there are bakeries in places like San Francisco and big cities that have starters that are literally 100 years old, right? The bakery's been around in the family for years. So that's pretty cool. I mean, you know, we've had where the sourdough, like we fed it and then we didn't have a container that was big enough and then it kind of exploded all over the counter. That definitely happens because again, it rises and expands when you feed it and when it's active. So you just have to account for things like that. Yeah. And listen, we've had loaves that are better than others. I mean, you definitely, you know, kind of get the gist of it over time. But it's really, we make probably for ourselves, we make a loaf pretty much every week. And now we do all kinds of different flavors, you know, lemon blueberry, chocolate cherry,